Hello and welcome to Sarva Gunn Sampann. Thank you for joining me once again on this podcast, where I have the honor and privilege of connecting with women of India, women of the diaspora, and spotlighting their journeys. My guest today is somebody who values trust, justice, and empathy. Her strengths include her emotional resilience and her willingness to learn. It's my honor to welcome Lom Harshni Chauhan to the show today. Lom, it's a great pleasure to have you. It's been so long, and I cannot wait to reconnect with you on this episode. How have you been?
Thank you, Anu. I've been well, busy. I'm in Canada now, and we came here 6 years ago. So you know how it is when you're a new immigrant. It's a very busy journey. So just been very busy trying to carve a new life in a new place. And but it's been rewarding in many ways. We've liked moving around. We've moved around a lot. So it's always nice to make a new place your home, and you know it's a different kind of adventure. So yeah, and it's really nice to reconnect with you after so many years.
Likewise. So we'll get started with our first segment, which is all about your childhood. It's Bachpan Ke Din. And here, take us back in time and, talk to us about what your childhood was like.
So I'm a child of the 70s, right? And it was a much, much simpler world than I think childhoods now are. Himachal is like this paradise, right? Like it's like a little cocoon in the madness that sometimes countries can be. And so it was a peaceful place. I grew up in Shimla, and Shimla now is super, super crowded. The last few times I've been there, but Shimla of our childhood was much smaller, much less population, and it was a calm place, a chill place. Like we walked around a lot. So I remember when I was in college, and that of course, when we studied in Anandpur, I remember I went to Bangalore to write an exam, and I met some the people I was staying with, right? So they were either from Bangalore or places around, and I remember one of them sharing with me. She said, "Oh, I went to Shimla last year, and there was not a single fat person there." And I found it very interesting because I had never really realized that, right? And because we were walking around so much, we had buses and all, of course, but there were set times. So we, if you needed to go anywhere, everybody walked around a lot. And it's hilly, so, it was a lot different. So I think there was a lot of nature and just natural health. There's very low crime rate. So things were safer. And I think from the home side, all of us were in sports. And as you know, our family was quite spiritual. So, but my mom was never ritualistic. My dad was very, particular about morning I have to do puja, evening I have to do puja. And he's very disciplined in his practice. My mom was more of a karma yogi, right? No, if I'm cooking, this is my puja. I'm cooking for my family and this is it. So I got both those elements, right? Allowed me to figure out what kind of thing appeals to me. And so it was a subtle kind of spiritual. We weren't supposed to you have to go to a temple or you have to do puja. It was never thrust on us, but there were these influences. Even like my grandparents, for example, like both my grandfathers, actually, both sides. I remember my grandfather would be sitting and one of them would just be Hare Ram, just sitting and chanting. So that was the kind of childhood I had. Sports, we were never pressured into you have to get good marks or stuff like that. So we studied what we needed to study, but nobody was sitting with us and or making us do it. So I think it was quite a relaxed childhood, and I feel for kids now because I think there is so much pressure on kids, even if the parents don't put environment puts, and I think it leads to unnecessary stress for them. And that basic foundation where you can just chill and just be yourself. I think in the long term that mental health, long-term health, that goes a long way.
Lom, Himachal is such a beautiful place, and thanks to YouTube, now you've got a lot of these travel logs, that keep showing these small hidden treasures of Himachal, the small villages, and it's just so beautiful. So something on my bucket list for sure. And you want to talk a little bit about your schooling? Where did you go to school and how was that experience?
So I went to a school called Convent of Jesus and Mary. So I was there throughout, right from KG to my 10th, and then there's a college called St. Bede's, where I went for my 11th and 12th. So I think we were the first batch or second batch, something like that, where the +2 system started. So we were amongst the initial batches. So our school didn't have. So I went to a college, but it was still like +2. But again, they were sister institutions, so right next door to each other. So again, a lot of influence of nuns and morning assembly and noon prayers, stuff like that. So I think I was very lucky that looking back, when I see, because my college, like you, was in an ashram, right? But now looking back, those 12 years, 13 years in a missionary school, like for me, I feel like in a way it was also like an ashram, right? Like while you were in those confines, you were still in a very similar environment, like, so to me, it seems like a very common thread, just having this protection, this kind of environment where we were led in a certain way, in a certain path.
Yeah. So, and any favorite subjects, anything that you were planning in terms of a career ahead, or was it all very organic and you just, one of those people that...
I liked languages. I always liked languages. I was never a science person. I was definitely not a maths person. And I was very happy when 10th finished. I said, okay, never again. But I did do my MBA, so I ended up studying a little math again. But I was more of a language and humanities person. I loved Sanskrit. Those couple of years that we had to learn Sanskrit in middle school, I loved studying that, and which was like very uncommon because most people didn't like that. I like that. My science teacher I met many years later, and she said, "You know what? I still remember your eyes used to be all red and like because I was sleepy in science classes." But that said, now actually I find science a lot more interesting. I can't recall it. I can't always, perhaps understand it, some concepts very organically, like I might say with language. Language comes more natural to me. But I think it was also the way things were taught then, in that time versus how things are, say, taught now, and the kind of resources we have now to learn things. It's a lot more interesting. Like history, for example. History was okay. Like, it seemed boring, but in the years since, when I've traveled and, and you find history is actually interesting, right? But we just study dates, this, that, and we just had the wrong association. So if I had to redo it, I think I would like a lot more subjects, but I think language, I loved the language, English, Hindi, Sanskrit, everything. But not the literature part. I like literally, do you remember we had a language and a literature class? I like the language part because you didn't have to prepare anything for that. I loved writing essays because I don't know, prose was easy for me, and I thought it was great fun. Write an essay, is science a boon or a bane? I thought, oh yeah, this is good. I can write about this, that kind of thing. So I like languages a lot.
And that was the reason why I was asking, because I know there's a connection there, the things you did later in life. And so I wanted to kind of understand where that came from. Was there an early influence or something? So yes, now we know. All right, we'll move into our next segment here, which is Ye Kahan Gaye Hum. This is slightly longer. It will take you back from your college days all the way to the present day. Fabulous experiences that you've had. So I can't wait to hear all of them. So go ahead.
So I finished at around, I was 17, I think. And when I was, I think I was still, it was either finishing 11th or something like that, or we went to Puttaparthi, right? This was my second trip. I'd been once when I was 10, which I won't count, but we went to Puttaparthi. And I remember I was sitting there and in the darshan, and these school students came, and they wear those white half saris or saris, all these young widows. And I looked at them and I said, "Oh, so nice! It would be so nice to study here." And so my dad and I, we went and got the prospectus, right? And it had all those different courses and programs in this syllabus. And I remember looking at what I was not a science student, as we've established. So then, okay, what can I do? And there was this. I had thought I'd study economics because my father had studied economics, and when you're growing up, you think you'll do what your parents have done, right? So I thought, oh, I'll study economics, and I was interested in politics. So I thought, okay, political science could be a good thing for me too, because I love sitting and just listening to people and what's happening in the world or in the country. Or my father was in a university, all this university politics. I used to love hearing all those kinds of things. So that seemed like a logical thing. And then I looked at the philosophy section, and the philosophy curriculum. It had Western philosophy, Indian philosophy, and Buddhism, this and that. And I think, oh, this sounds so interesting, and I would like to learn this. And then I looked up at all these kids coming, and I said, what better place than this place to get to know about this? And so that, I think, made me, for the first time ever, think, because I was thinking I'll go to Delhi, and when you're a small town kid, big cities, especially in the 1980s, late 80s and all, they have this, there's a charm, right? You want to go to a big city, see all the things that you haven't seen. And kids nowadays are a lot more exposed, but during our time, exposure was quite limited, right? Unless you already had relatives living out, which we didn't. So then it became a choice: do I go to Delhi or do I go to Puttaparthi? And Puttaparthi won for me. So a lot of people, over the years, later on when I went, they assumed that my parents had sent me. They hadn't. I chose, I wanted to go there. So we landed up there. And it allowed me to meet people from all over India, right? We had from all over India, which at that time was not a common thing. Now kids, travel everywhere, and even for studies and otherwise. But during our time, that wasn't so common. So I think that gave this pan-India kind of, this sensibility. It allowed that. And I think that place, because of the discipline and the spiritual ethos that was there, I think it gave a foundation for our emotional, psychological, mental, and spiritual grounding, which I think has served us well. And I think you would agree, which has served us well over the years, the decades, as life has happened. I was an ambitious kid. So I don't know if you recall, I was kind of involved in a lot of stuff. I used to do extracurriculars. I was ambitious, so I was studying a lot. I was just very busy. I didn't believe in wasting time. And I think I pushed myself too hard, which was good for the first 2 years. But I think my last semester, I kind of burnt out. But that allowed me to realize that I need to pace myself, because before that I didn't know how to pace myself. So I actually missed the gold medal. I was aiming for the gold medal, the university gold medal, and I actually missed that. And one of our teachers told us afterwards that I missed it by like 0.0 some point, and that was because I burnt out in the last semester. So that was it.
And
I think it was a very valuable time.
Yeah, I also recall the daredevilry that you enacted, the sports meet, standing on a pole and doing yoga or something. So you'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so
how did you prepare for that stuff? That was like
no. So I used to do yoga even when in Shimla, like before I moved. So I started yoga when I was 10. My mom started teaching me, and also there was another teacher there. But like I didn't have too much of a instructed, like a training, but I had the starting, and then because I was naturally interested in it, I just continued. And I used to do karate when I was a child too, like during my middle and high school. So I did participate in competitive yoga before I moved to college. So we used to have national levels and state levels. So state was a much smaller affair because Himachal is a small state, but nationals, there used to be people from all over. And these were people who trained the whole year, so they had proper established training institutes and stuff like that. And I still remember people from Andhra, and there was this young kids from Assam, and very, very, very flexible. So we were less, I'm from a state which is very chilled out and laid back, and we didn't have that, that competitive environment around. So all the resources. So I just used to do my own thing the whole year. And I think before we went to the nationals, we had a 1 month training camp, and that was it basically. But I was lucky that so the last time that I participated, I think I was around 16. So I think I was number 5 All India in that nationals. And then 17, I moved south. So I couldn't participate in competitions anymore. But so that background was there. And then that program that you were referring to, so Padmaja, my classmate, and I don't know if you remember Padmaja. So she's both of us, we took charge of this, this one choreography kind of thing. And we had, I think, about more than 100 girls in that choreography. So like they were on the ground, and there were around 15, 20 of us who climbed poles, and then we did some some configurations there. So I was in the center top pole because I knew yoga, and I did asanas on top of that. So I think that's what you remember.
Yeah. I don't think anybody can forget that. That was like
I think it was different. A couple of years back, I went to Purupati to ashram, and so our vice warden, did you remember her? Yeah, right. So she met me, and so I just went to wish her, and I thought, like, it's been 20 years. She wouldn't remember me anymore, 25, 30 years. And she had forgotten my name, but she said, "Aren't you the one who did yoga on that pole?" I said, "Yes, I'm that one." So she remembered that, like, which was amazing, like, to have that kind of memory at that age for them. It was, so I think received a lot of love, definitely.
Yeah, so na bhuto na bhavishyo, it's like nobody in the past has done it, nobody in the future might do it. So that's why you're remembered fondly. Then what happened? You finished your undergrad.
I finished my undergrad. I went back to Shimla. I did my MBA there. And ironically, I was an external candidate because I did my undergrad outside of Himachal. So I did my MBA there. And after that, I moved to Delhi for a while, to find jobs. And I didn't enjoy that because I think when you come from small towns, there's so much you don't know about big cities and how they work, right? And a lot of kids learn in college, right? Because they move out and all that. But our college, yours and mine, was in an ashram. So the learning that a lot of kids do during college to learn about the world, ours was an inward journey, not outward journey, right? So I think what I knew also got reduced, So I found that a very challenging part. Like, I was there about a year, I think, and we didn't know anybody, from Himachal. We didn't have relatives and connections, so there were no references who could get me a job. We had no work experience, so obviously at that time. So I kept applying to for interviews, but I was never being called for interviews, so it was just very, very, I think it was stressful because you just didn't know what to do and how to go about it. Finally, everything figured out. I think I got some very good advice, and I think that's one thing I feel very lucky about. I've, at key points, I think people just appear and give you some advice which sticks, and which is actually good advice. And there was this one woman who was from Himachal, and she still has an established training institute there. And she said, "Lom, like a lot of our kids who come from Shimla, Himachal, and we don't have exposure, right? So I advise, do a sales job. And it doesn't matter if you're not a salesperson. It doesn't matter if you know nothing about it. What that does, it forces you to meet new people every day, face different, and it kind of brings us out of our shell, So I said, okay. So I applied for sales jobs, and there are a lot more sales jobs than there are other kind of jobs. And so I actually, for a few months, did that, sales kind of thing, just going from office to office to office. It was terrible. But what she said was true, because it allowed me to, come out of that shell, because I was also a very shy person. So it allowed you to come out of a shell and build up confidence, which then helps you in other things, right? So I did that, but then I didn't really enjoy Delhi at all. And then this opening came up in Himachal, but not in Shimla, but in Himachal, they were establishing an MBA program in a university there. It's a place called Solon. So I applied there and I got through there. And then I shifted for my work, I shifted to Solon. And I realized I love teaching. So I finally, via Delhi, but I found my calling.
So is that what you did in Solon then? Because there's also a Solon,
Yes.
Ohio. So I'm glad that you're clarifying,
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
But it's spelled Solon. It's a small city.
Same.
Yeah.
So Solon in Himachal, it's close to Shimla. There's a university there. It's horticulture and forestry university, and they were establishing a MBA program. So I was one of the first faculties there. So we helped establish that MBA program, and so I was very young, and the first batch was actually my same age. So many of them were older than me, right? Because I was just I like because I cleared my I was 17 when I went for undergrad, right? So I was a year ahead. So everybody was 24, 25, and so they were actually just a little bit older than I was. So looking back, I really didn't know much at all because I just didn't have the life or the work experience. But so I had to work a little bit more later on in life to build up that experience. But yeah, but it was interesting.
Like you said, you might have been teaching to people who were older than you, but thank God you had a little bit of the exposure in Delhi and some work experience.
I think that sales really helped because it allowed you to it just build up a confidence. And and also you're like if you're in an office, you still learn, but I think it's like going through fire because you're meeting new places and you're walking into offices you don't know, like you just it's tough job, like it's like door to door kind of thing, except you're doing it for offices, what I was doing, and also did hotel sales for a while. So I did 2 jobs there in Delhi, but I think it just allowed you to. It was like a very intense, short but intense experience, and yeah. So it's when somebody gives good advice. My learning is that it helps to try it out.
Yes, especially when it's not coming from you. You're not thinking about that, and then there's this perspective, this idea that somebody plants.
Yes.
And nothing prepares you like on the job work experience when you actually gain
No. Yeah.
college studies. Great. So then what happened? You finished you were teaching. So what
I
happened?
started teaching. So after I was there for a few years. I think I was there around 5 years or something. And after that, I got married and we moved out after that. We left India. So I left India in 2002. And so earlier, my husband was in Philippines, but then soon after we got married, we moved to China, and a totally different, adventure began. We came back once to India, but then by and large, we were there until we moved to Canada, but just in different cities in China. So that was a whole different adventure, like, which also resulted in that book. Although the book is not about China per se, but a lot of influences drawn there. We loved there. Such wonderful people, like the kind of love we have. And I always tell this to people because a lot of Indians, especially, they ask me, "What was China like?" Because you have this. I think for us Indians, that war with China is very big in our minds, right? And so over the years, I always, "Oh, what is China like?" And I don't know, maybe they expect me to say something, but we were there 15 or so years, and I tell them I lived in 4 cities in different parts of China. I don't have a single really bad experience to talk of in 4 cities in 15, 16 years. And what does that say about a country and its people? Right? So, and my daughter was born there, and the kind of love she has received, like, people who are, just strangers, and but the kind of love like she has received, and us too. So we have just this immense appreciation and love for, the people we have met. And I think one thing I realized after I moved to China was that I think again in practical terms, just how like humans are humans. We all really aren't different. We look different, our customs are different, but at the end of the day, we are all just sharing the same human emotions, right? And to be in a place where literally you didn't even know the language when you started, you knew nobody, and then to receive love from strangers, it is such a lovely, and I've been very grateful that we've been able to experience that. So whenever people talk about countries, I say, you know what? There's governments and then there's people. And we should never confuse the two.
That is true. Did you ever get a sense of being insecure, or the general environment? There's suspicion, there's surveillance,
Never.
of course, in a country like that.
So surveillance, I'm sure is there, but that's for every foreigner, right? But I think when you are in any country, actually, like even in democracies, but more so in non-democratic countries, I think you're there for a short time, right? You're there for your work. And so in our mind, it was, we are here as guests, basically, right? And we are receiving all this love. We're receiving all this. If you keep out of politics, I think it's fine. Like, because that is their system. Whether or not we agree or not agree with it, it's totally different. That is their system. It's for them to work out. It's not my place to tell them, right? So you keep your head down, you do your work, you meet people. If there's surveillance, we never really, it's not intrusive, right? I mean, nobody's going to poke you if you're not poking into their affairs, right? And I was very active because we moved around a lot. And when my daughter was born, we were in a place called Chongqing. So my daughter was born there. This is central Western China. They call it Western China, but geographically it's like more like not like Tibet kind of west, but somewhere towards west. And I was involved in a lot of social work there. And for a few years I did that. And we were a group of women from around the world. And so we had a community of foreign women and local women. And we had these, we were collecting money. We had these programs where that money was being used. And that allowed us to see a very different part of China too, right? We saw the villages, the schools, the infrastructure, people. So we weren't just in a bubble, what happens when you're in these foreign, any country, and especially as an expat, when you're there, you end up being in a bubble, expat bubble. So this allowed you to peek outside and to see and to interact with people. And because this work is the kind of work where you're dealing with various kind of people in society, right? So we were talking to corporate entities because they're the ones who give funds. We were talking to media because they're the ones who publish your work, right? We're talking to school administrators because our programs were in schools for children. You meet with volunteers, whether they're university students or just regular people. So you meet all these different kinds, or other people who are doing amazing work in the social sector, right? So you meet all these different kind of people, and I mean, people problems are people problems, right? Everywhere. Everybody's just trying to earn enough, be a little happy, and that's it, right? So as long as you keep your head down, don't cause mischief. It's not your country to cause mischief for, and they won't trouble you.
Yeah. What kind of conversations were you having, if you remember any, with the local population, and what issues stand out, now when you look back, as something that you remember as being, pressing for the people of China, at least the folks that you were interacting with, wherever you were living?
So we generally didn't talk about politics, like I said, like, that aside, I think people, just like people everywhere, people are just trying to find good jobs, study. But I did find one theme, which actually I've written briefly about this in the book. So I think there was this, in pockets, obviously not with everyone, but in pockets, there is this renewed resurgence for the spiritual grounding, right? Because I don't know how familiar you are with Chinese modern history, but they've had decades and decades of, until 1970s, they've had decades of, there was civil war, then there were famines, and then, so a lot of disturbance, right? Social, political, economic disturbance. And so I think for many decades, people were just maybe more, and I'm not an expert on this, so but like more concerned with, I think it's just more survival issues, right? Whether it was political survival or economic survival and stuff like that. And since they opened up the economy in 1980s, a lot of prosperity came, right? And then people got busy with, keeping pace with that, and they made huge amounts of progress, right? And like how they say, like after you reach certain economically certain place, and then you start thinking, okay, now next what? And I think that's, as a society, I think that I did see themes of that. For example, Christianity was really growing very, very fast while I was there. I don't know what the situation is now. Christianity was growing, right? I actually met a couple of people who were interested in Indian spirituality, right? So I met a couple of people who said, oh, we've been to some ashram in India, or I even met somebody who was a follower of Osho. And so I was like, really? Okay, I didn't know that, because I haven't met so many Indian people, right? And they said, oh yeah, no, we do that, and they were meditating, stuff like that. I met someone else who I think was they were followers of the Hare Rama, Hare Krishna movement. So I think there was this renewed interest in the journey inward. And Buddhism, of course, right? Because Buddhism, of course, is Taoism, Buddhism is a much older thing for them.
Absolutely. And in all those surrounding countries, in and around China. What happened after 15 years? So you were there for 15 years, and looks like it was pretty uneventful and, nothing like what folks would expect.
Eventful, just not in a negative way. Like my daughter was born there, for example, and I moved there like 2 months before she was to be born, and this was Chongqing, right? And my Chinese language skills that time was very, very rudimentary. We had lived 2 years in southern China, and I had learned Chinese then. And then we went back to India for about 8 months or something. So when I came back, the little I knew had also reduced, right? And we came to the city. We knew nobody. There were very less foreigners that time. And I still remember I had a cesarean, and even like the last 2 months I was visiting doctors. The doctors didn't know English. My Chinese was very rudimentary. And so we kind of just managed. And I remember my cesarean, there were, I think, 7 people in the operating room, and you're awake, right? Because they anesthetize you below, not above. And so when they gave me the anesthesia, whatever it is, epidural, whatever it is, this doctor, I remember, was tapping or poking something on my feet. And he kept asking me, in Chinese, is it paining or not? And I could feel it. And I kept saying it's paining. So after a little while, so these people looking at each other confused, right? Oh, why isn't it working? It should have worked by now. And then one of those doctors had a brainwave, and then he used the Chinese word. So the Chinese word for pain is tongue, right? And he was asking me tongue, bu tongue, like, is it paining or not? Tongue, bu tongue. And I kept saying tongue, right? And then he said tongue or ganjue. Ganjue means sensation. So, and from somewhere at the back of the recesses, I remembered my, the 1 year that I had studied Chinese, which was already more than a year back. I remember that word ganjue. I said, oh, ganjue sensation. And I said, yeah, it's ganjue. It's not paining. I can feel it, right? And I was being overcautious because I didn't want to be cut open while I was still feeling something. So it was okay to feel that somebody's tapping you. It shouldn't have pain, because I don't know what they were doing with them, whether it was tap or whatever, I couldn't see. So that's when they actually started the operation. So it was very eventful, but just not in the way like people expect. Maybe there was racism or there was, negative. No, we didn't. We just got a lot of love from people. But we also got this, like, there was just so patient, not a single, 7 people there, not a single one lost their temper. Like, why did you come without? And now I think of it, we were so foolish. Why didn't we hire an interpreter? Like, we were young and foolish and just didn't think, we just went in. So very eventful, just not in the way people expect.
Yeah, and that's also a motivation to learn a foreign language. Like if you end up in your situation, thank God.
Or hire an interpreter, right? Like if you were wiser than we were.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's an important perspective and experience that you've shared, because there's so much hate against Asians, and there's hate against every group. I don't know if there's any part of the world where you don't see that, even in America, even every part of the world. So to know that people are people everywhere, and they're all battling similar issues, and you just have to keep politics out of it, to feel that kinship, to feel that connection.
Yeah, so I've been very, very fortunate. I honestly have not faced personally hate from people. But I realize that's that's a really good place to be, and not many people are this lucky. My daughter says, like, she says, you haven't, like, but even in schools, there's just microaggressions and stuff like that. But I think a lot of this hate that you talk about is also a result of politics, right? It's all power games, right? And people are pitted against each other for whatever gains. And if one is just able to keep your head out of that, people are people, right?
And also our own sense of belonging to a certain community, a certain group. We never make friends outside of that, and that is how you just cocoon and shell yourself from learning about other cultures, other people. So if you don't have friends from any other part of the world, how will you ever know that they're on the same? They might be on the same wavelength as you on every.
So I'll tell you an incident. When I had this was when my daughter was born. So I remember this conversation with someone who said, "Oh, like Chinese are the greatest race. Like we are, thousands of years of history, this, that." And that actually made me think, because we say the same thing in India. And if you remember that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, her dad says the same thing about Greeks, right? So I realized that everybody actually says the same thing about, or at least every old civilization thinks we're the greatest, right? And everybody, I think, has time under the sun, right? Like I remember visiting Thailand, and the person who was showing us around, I remember her words were something to the effect, "Oh, the great Siam kingdom. It was still here, it was still here." And Thailand also feels they were great. Everybody feels they were great at one time, right? Right now, America is great, or other countries coming up. So I realized every civilization has a time under the sun. And then whatever time we had, we hang on to that as a community because it gives us a sense of, I don't know, maybe collective ego, pride, arrogance, depending on where you are on the spectrum. And we hang on to that, right? Part of it is identity, part of it is insecurity, part of it is, I don't know, politics, right? But everybody has had that time under the sun. And that made me realize. And like you said, so we had an extended interaction, like, over the years with that. I realized that not just my perspective, but her perspective also changed, through our interactions, because she realized that, yeah, other cultures feel the same way, just like I realized, because growing in your own country, that is the only thing you hear. We are great. And then you go to another country, they say, we are also great, and well, who's great? But I think turn by turn, we all are great.
When everybody is the hero of their own story, right? Of their own journey.
Yes. So I think it's very important to keep a distance, right? And I think that's what we learned when we were in the ashram, right? Distance. And it is distance not just from, oh, I'm doing this work, distance from that outcome. It's also collective cultural distance, right? Like identity, it's also distance in who am I? Like, even my name, my community, my personality. It's not easy, but I think that's a journey worth taking, because it keeps you at peace. And I think at a collective level, it keeps us in peace, right?
Yeah, and that's the whole crux of Bhagavad Gita also, right? You do things without a sense of attachment. You do them dispassionately, and that's the secret.
Yes, exactly. But Anu, many times we tend to, all of us, we tend to interpret it many times just on the basis of an individual effort, right? But if you enlarge that concept to a collective effort or a collective identity, that same principle applies, right? And this hate that you were talking about, this hate is because we are clinging to that outcome, to that collective outcome, which is, I am this race, or I am this culture, or I am this thing, right? That's also an outcome of a certain way of thinking or a certain way of doing things, right? So I think it applies to everything, not just, oh, let me do my effort and see if I get a job or not. Like, it's not just at that level, but which is where I think most of us tend to apply it. Or let me just do this for my in-laws, whether or not they appreciate it. That's the level that we tend to apply it.
So, what happened after China? You came back to India and then again.
No, from China, we came to Canada. So we came here 2017 well, this was the latest chapter. We've been here 6 years, just completed. It's been its own journey. And I think like for my husband and I, we often say like, we thought like, we had never lived more than 3 years anywhere, right? 3 or 4 years anywhere. So I left home at 17. After 17, I had never been anywhere more than 3, 4, maybe something like that. And same for my husband, right? His dad was in the army, so he's never lived anywhere long enough, right? So for us, this is the first time since I was 17, we've completed 6 years in one place, in one house, one city, So it's a totally different experience. And we thought we will find it very easy to move to Canada, because we thought, well, we've been moving all the time, but it's a very different experience. I think immigrating is a totally different experience from just moving around psychologically and economically also, but psychologically, I think.
I hope this one also is, eventful, but in a good way. And you're having some positive.
Again, we've been very fortunate. Because my husband came here on a work transfer. So we didn't have to go through the grind that many immigrants go through. We didn't have to compromise and do a lot of, pick up any job for survival. We were extremely, extremely fortunate. He was transferred from his company. So we had a bills paid from day one. And I actually was able to get back to teaching again. So when I was in Shanghai, I was working in corporate training for a few years. And in Chongqing, I was in social sector, right? So I'm back to teaching now after 1990s academic environment. And I love being in this space.
Great. And we'll be talking about that. So that helps us segue into our next segment, which is Kam Ki Baat. And here I want you to talk about what is it that you teach. I know you've got an MBA, you've taught, you've worked in the social sector, social work arena, and you've also done some corporate training. What do you teach in Canada, and what is the subject? And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I work in a college here called Conestoga College. I've in fact just a few months back been hired as a full-time. I was working part-time until now. And so I teach organizational behavior, and which is a very interesting very interesting course, right? And it deals all with people's behavior, right? And it's a lot of psychology and sociology and everything, anthropology, everything together. So I teach that. Well, currently we have a lot of international students in Canada. A lot of Indian students, actually. So, which is strange because I'm in Canada, but a lot of my students are Indian students. But it's also interesting because many of them are 18, 20-year-olds, and, they're trying to navigate work and studies and, just a new culture and everything. So, yeah. So that's where I'm at right now.
And what are some outcomes for your students when they graduate? What kind of opportunities await? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have a lot of undergrad, and these are like the international students, especially, they come for diplomas and certificates, right? Short term, 1 year, 2 years. And even domestic students, so the colleges have certificates and diplomas, business related. International students usually come here because then they work, and then I think this gives them a chance they see it as a pathway to possibly immigrating. So many of them are working in different industries. Some go on for higher education, some go back, some go back home if they can't, if they don't get their permanent residency and stuff. But various industries, because my course is across programs, right? It's not a program in itself. So if you're doing accounting, they will still have organizational behavior because people are people. Like, people are people everywhere in the world, and people are people in every industry, in every sector, right? So it's the same theme. Behaviors don't really change that much. People create the culture of the organization, and the culture impacts your behavior also, right? So it works both ways. So we have people from different programs. So it's not like because of my program, like my course, that they go into anything, but yeah, it helps you because you understand how, for example, teamwork, right? How do teams work? Why would some people not want to share their opinions in a meeting, for example, right? So what's the behavior? What are the concepts there? What is happening, right? So those are the kind of things that they study.
Very interesting. So congratulations on your new job. You've been here a couple of years now?
I've been working a few years, but full-time job, yeah.
Full-time job.
So
Great.
feeling more settled now that,
Yeah.
more, yeah.
And making an impact on young minds, shaping.
I love teaching. I think teaching, I think it's a privilege to be a teacher because you get to be a part of someone else's journey, right? And it's an important part of their journey. So I realized, like, when I moved from Delhi, that I love teaching, and grading not so much, but because that's a totally different, yeah. But every job has parts that you like, and parts which are more tedious. But yeah, it's I think it's a privilege, and I think in its own way, teaching is also a seva, right? And it's also very autonomous work, right? Like, you do how much you study, how much you want. It's an inward journey also, right? How much you want to learn. It's seeking knowledge. So you can just do that irrespective of what your targets are, right? Like, you can just keep working as much as you want and grow yourself. So I think teaching allows you to do that.
And always researching and learning about the world and drawing from your own experiences. It's
exactly right.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, Lom, thank you for sharing that aspect about what you do. And we'll now move on to our next segment, which is the X Factor. And here, I can't wait to hear all about your book. So you've authored a book, and I want to hear. I haven't read it, but I have, kind of caught glimpses here and there from things that you've shared. But would love to know a little more about what this book was about.
So my book is called Visa, Stickers, and Other Matters of the Soul. And there were actually two things which were the triggers for starting to write that book. One was, so my daughter was, she was born in China, she grew up there, right? And so when she was around 5, she started asking, like around 4 and 5, children discover death. And they start asking, okay, what's death and what will happen? What if you die, right? And I think that's a very common fear that kids that age have. And so she started asking that. And, it's your first time being a parent. You're not around people who can help you. So you kind of figure your own way around. So what do you answer? So of course you dive into what you know or what you have been trained to think. So I found that I was diving into my training, which was basically my ashram training, right? And my things that I learned while I was growing up in my family environment. So I was diving into that, and I was sharing with her what I could make sense of, in the philosophy and Indian spirituality. And she was a bright kid, so she is a bright kid, and so she used to take it to a different level. She's 5, 6, but I would explain to her something, and she would just take it to a different level, which is very interesting for me because I had not really had that kind of exposure to little kids. I'm like, oh my God, children can think so much. Like, it was very strange. So I think I started noting some of those things down, like blog post kind of length, just noting some of those things down. And then the second trigger was so Swami, our guru, so the Sai Baba, he died around 2012, was it, or something like that. And I hadn't been to Puttaparthi for, I think it had been 11, 12 years or something, right? Not since I had left India. I hadn't been able to go back. And so, but, that kind of made me kind of think about him in a more intense way, right? And so you are emotional, right? Somewhere inside. And I think life in the meantime, I had also seen the value of what we had been taught and how it had helped me. And So these two things, I kind of wanted to share that, like what I have learned and my attempts to pass it to my child. And so it was in the backdrop of, we were in China, but it was really about passing on some learnings that I had received, whether from my parents or from my culture or from my guru, and passing it on to my child. So it was that parampara that I was, in my mind, I was trying to pass on, right? And so that was the trigger. And then I had these little snippets I had written, and I said, let me see, can I make it, they kind of put it together? And so I used to love books. As a child, I was a bookworm. But I didn't know anybody who was an author. We were small town kids. We didn't even know what writing as a profession means, right? So just the thought of, and I wasn't in India in the intervening decades, right? So I was totally cut off from what was happening in the in world, right? If I was in India, Delhi or somewhere, maybe I would have attended workshops, stuff like that. So I had just not been a part of any of these things. So the thought of writing a book seemed very audacious, right? So I said, I'm not going to think of it like a book, because I can write a book. How can I? So I said, okay, let me see how much I can write. Like, where can I take it? Let's just go where it's meant to go. So I started with that, and it ended up becoming a book. So it has these so it's a memoir. It's about what I've learned from my culture, my parents, my guru, and my daughter has just lifted it up to. So she's the star of that book, honestly. Like, I'm just the narrator, she's the star. And it was eye-opening for me, because you realize that kids are so mature and so wise beyond what I thought them to be, right? And I think it's true, that cliche that they say that they become our teachers. I think children do become your teacher as a parent, if you allow yourself to be open to that teaching. And I think so that book allowed me to actually put those things there. And even the title, Visa Stickers and Other Matters of the Soul. So it comes from two things. So one of the kind of game we used to play, so my daughter was very shy and anxious. So, as when I taught her about, okay, rebirth, reincarnation, and stuff like that. So I said, the soul, whatever we've done, that sticks to the soul. And then when we go to the next birth, soul takes all the stickers around, right? So if you're angry, that anger sticker comes on. If you're kind, kindness sticker comes on. So so when we used to, for example, we go to a McDonald's, right? And so she's shy, and but if she is able to say, I want the burger, then the courage sticker comes on, right? And we would make a whole game out of it, where I would put it on her back, yeah, right? And if she controlled her anger, that anger sticker would rip off, like we used to just play like that. So that's where the stickers of the soul comes from. And Visa comes from my daughter, actually, because she was 6, and we were traveling. We were in a taxi. I was dropping her to school, and we were talking about, again, some conversation like this. And she said, I said, do you remember what I said about? She said, yeah, I know. We are not the body, we're the soul, and the soul does this, right? So she repeated that, very bored. And then she suddenly perked up, and she said, oh, it's like, Mama, like we're in the taxi now, but if the taxi driver, the body wasn't there, if it was just the soul, everybody would run away going, yeah, ghost. And then she said, it's like, what's that thing, Mama, that we have, you said, and she made a square like this, that we have, you said, to live in China, we need. I said, passport? No, that other thing you said to be in China. I said, visa? Yeah, visa. And she got very excited. And I still remember, she's 6 years old. She put her hands there. She said, the body is the visa of the soul. Something like that, she said. And I still remember, little kid, the body is the visa of the soul. And it was like, that is profound. This is a 6-year-old kid, right? That is really profound. And that's where the title comes from. Visa Stickers and Matters of the Soul.
That is just amazing, for her to grasp these concepts, ask you the questions, and really be that guiding light for you to write that book. Had she not shown that spark, had she not shown that curiosity, I don't know if that book would have happened.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So so yeah. So there was a joke a couple of years after that in school, they had that dress up as your favorite book character day. So she joked, Mama, can I just go as myself? Because I'm a character in the book. So,
That's so sweet.
yeah.
So,
But yeah.
yeah, that is wonderful for kids at that young age. And like you said, we don't give them credit for how much they know,
Correct.
actually. They read us like open books all the time. And it's just, maybe we don't have those kind of conversations because we keep saying they're kids. Unko kya pata hai? And
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
uh,
But they're not. They are so much more than just kids, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You just need to sit down and connect with a child. And then, when they start talking, you're like, wow, I didn't realize that this little one knows so much
No,
or
so much. Yeah.
thinks so much, thinks in so many different ways. It's not the worldly information that you pick up from textbooks, but it's just what's coming from within them, the natural wonder, the natural.
Yeah. So they adapted to their world, right? The world information appropriate for their age. So, for example, I'll just give you another incident. It's there in the book. So in school, I think grade one. I think it was grade one. So around six, right? I think they taught them economics, right? So basic economics. So needs and wants. And now my dad studied from the Delhi School of Economics. So when we were visiting India, so I had this. I said, you know what? These days they teach in grade one or something too. They teach you wants and needs and stuff like that. So I said, you know how it is in class. I said, I told my daughter, I said, tell Papa, Kaira, tell Papa what are needs and wants. And I still remember she was standing on the chair on a dining table. She was standing on the chair with leaning on the table. And very matter of fact, she says, Mama is a need, Baba is a want. So, so they still apply to the world information, just things which are appropriate to their world, right?
The way they look at it. Wow. Wow, Lom, this is fascinating. It's great that you authored a book and it all just happened. You didn't plan,
It just happened.
but it was meant to happen because you're also training in the background. You had a passion for language, and then you were a very precocious child who asked you those deep questions and really allowed you to uncover for your own self, a legacy that you want to leave behind and pass it on to your daughter. So wonderful.
I think that's a really nice word, because in my mind, when I was writing it, I was actually, so that book was written both for my daughter. It was like you said, legacy. I want to leave her something, which outlives me. So that was a part of it. And part of it, when I was writing that, I also in my mind wrote it for all of us ex-students. Because, Swami was a parent figure for us, right? And so for me, in my heart, it was also like, okay, I'm writing this, I'm sharing this, and I want to share this on behalf of all of us students. Not all of us are in a position or in that thing to put it in this particular format. I'm trying to put it, but it's not just my words, it's those words. Okay, the daughter part was mine, but like the other parts are on behalf of all of us. So I think that was the sentiment. And I still remember one thing when we were in the ashram that we were told again and again and again. I remember Swami saying that when any action is started with a good intention, the resources and things appear to make it happen, right? That the value of the intention. And I often thought at that time, because whenever I would sit down to write, the words, the thoughts, everything would just flow. So I didn't have to do multiple redrafts, and there was no struggle in writing it. It just flowed. Like it was like I was in this bubble, this special space where things were just flowing. And these were all very new for me, because a lot of concepts that people talk about, right? Where you say, like, when you create something, it's just something flowing through you rather than you creating. And I had a glimpse into what that must mean, because, like, yes, like you said, like the things were in place for the body and the mind, like, going to a certain kind of school, those nuns who, those the effort they put into, ground into us that a certain level of language proficiency, which helped you to, all those things, everything works, but at the body level, to allow you to be an instrument where these thoughts can flow. Right. And so I thought, like, just writing that book in itself was such a spiritual experience in that sense, that it allowed me to glimpse things which perhaps I would not have. And I often think to that maybe somewhere that intention was a good one. And the ideas came when I got in touch with, I had nobody. I didn't know how to go about publishing a book. I wrote to publishers. It got accepted by 2 publishers, in fact, and these are traditional publishers. I didn't have to self-publish, and these are traditional publishers. Finally, I went with Pan Macmillan. So to be able to get good established traditional publishers in itself, it's such a tough task. Things just happened. I mean, I had to do the work, but that's it. So yeah. So I think legacy is a really nice word, and that's the sentiment I wrote it from.
Lom, anything else you want to talk about your XFactors, XFactors, you're an author, and that's so special. I'll be sure to add a link to the Amazon website where, we have your book on sale. I'll definitely make it a point to get my copy. And I hope others who are watching will also look at it if they're interested in matters that pertain to the soul, because I think it's going to be very interesting. And, it's one truth that's told in so many different ways.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be great.
I don't know if I have anything profound to say. I think my father used to say one thing. Live and let live. And I think that is so important for all of us individually as well as collectively. Do what seems right to you and let others do what seems right to them. I think, whether it is about beliefs, whether it is how they want to live their life, whether it is about someone wants, whether it's LGBTQ, I know there's all these things, just let people live, and he lived his life like that. He just kept to himself, and he had this immense sense control over himself. Like even in the family, if we were arguing, he would not get pulled into it. He would say, nonsense, bekar ki baatein, or he would say, if you said something, he said, in Hindi, he would say, "Meri sehat ho kya karo?" Like, how does it impact me or my health, right? Like, just let people be, live and let live. And I think that is something I'm trying to do more consciously also. I try to, it's not easy because someone says something to you and then of course everything just goes down. But I think when someone says something good to you, mind it. And I think for me, I've been lucky. I've had people around me who said right things the right time. For example, my eldest brother at one time said, I was around 17, 18 or something. He said, "You know what? You read so many. You should read more of biographies and autobiographies of, great people." And I said, "Okay." And I started reading more of those. And actually, they inspire you. You learn about, things, they're good role models to have. It's just sometimes simple. Or there was this one family friend of ours. I remember I was sitting with my dad and him, and I even remember the place. It was an iconic restaurant called Baljee's in Shimla, which is unfortunately closed down now, but all Shimlites know it, if anybody listens to this. But yeah, we were sitting there, and he's from an old Brahmin family, and I remember him. I used to call him Uncle, Lomi Uncle, and he said, "My father used to say that if someone comes to you for help, don't say no, because if it is in that person's destiny to get help, that person will get help. If not from you, you'll get it from someone else. But you're losing a chance to improve yourself and your book of records." And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. It was such a different perspective from you losing an opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think Swami Vivekananda also talks somewhere about this whole notion that we are helping people, we are doing things for others. He says, who are we? Who are we to help anybody? The world was there before we were there, and it's going to be there even after we're gone. And what we're doing is getting an opportunity to serve another person. And for that, we should be grateful and feel that it's a privilege that's come our way. We are no one to really help. I think that kind of comes to mind when you...
Yeah, but it's very difficult, no? And in reality to not have that. But I thought just the fact, and it just stayed with me. I was young. I think I was in my early 20s, but it has stayed with me that actually so beautiful. So I think whenever people say good things, it doesn't matter what religion it's coming from, it doesn't matter what culture it's coming from, take it, and don't forget to have some fun and joy in life. I think that's very important.
And for you to have that role model in your father, who must have really practiced to get to the stage where he was able to not get, drawn into places that would...
I think it's both. I think his personality naturally was like that, right? And he was very disciplined. So it allowed him to stay in. My mom, like I said, is more of a Karam Yogi, right? So she's the one who, if she was the type who, if she saw a dirty toilet, public toilet, she would clean it. Like, that kind of thing. So I've had both of those influences. So been very fortunate that I've had these kind of influences. And of course, multiple people, both in extended family and, my aunts, just so many people around. And I realize as I've grown up now, and in fact, just a few days back, we were sitting with friends and I said, I've realized that one of the biggest privilege that we have had is being born into the right kind of families, and not just socioeconomically, that too, like if you were born, like in India, if you're just born in a wrong caste, the life can be so difficult, right? So it's a privilege to be born in the right socioeconomic community, right? And it's not a right. We haven't really done anything to earn it, right? But to be aware, and I think as I've grown, I've become more aware of that. And I follow some people on Twitter and social media, and it's allowed me to get a glimpse into the difficulties they face. These are highly educated, much more capable people than I am. And the kind of difficulties they said, I have never had to face those, right? Little things, whether it's day-to-day life. So I think keeping yourself open to what other people are facing is very important, right? It actually allows you to appreciate what you have and to not take it for granted, and to not let it go to your head. I think that's important. And I was saying and not just the socioeconomic, but even just the fact that, like, I'm in teaching. I don't have to worry about, corruption or, things like that, or making some really very tricky ethical choices, which sometimes if you're in public life or in, business, you have to make some very difficult ethical choices, and there's no winning from those choices, right? There's no right answer. And teaching is, in that sense, it is such a nice space. You can just, from your heart, just sincerely learn, sincerely teach, help students. And that is a privilege to be in this kind of thing where I don't have to make these kind of decisions, right? And so I think, and I think just let live and have some joy. Just
would love to learn about your self-care routine, which is our next segment. And I want to know, what do you do? You are a yoga maven, yoga expert. Have you been in touch with that? And what else do you do to take care of yourself at, the 4 different levels that I talk about: mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional?
Again, I was lucky to have been introduced to yoga at a young age. I think that has served me well. I'm not as regular now, last few years, as I should be, but I was also into sports. Like I did martial arts when I was in school, and and I was in Shimla, so we were always walking up and down. So I think that physicality was a part of it. So I am now trying to get more structure into my exercise the last few years, because in between, like especially after I came to Canada, I just went just got busy with other things, and it just went awry. So I'm trying to now. I'm learning skating, ice skating. So I'm doing that. I'm also trying to learn swimming, because I think swimming is a really good exercise to do as you get older. So I'm preparing for my older age, basically, and I'm finding skating is helping me a lot with my knees, right? Because after 50 now, like, a lot of creakiness, and of course, yoga is always there. So I think physically those things are, and of course, if like you are in US, right? US, Canada, there are so many really good hiking trails and all that stuff. So if you have friends or family who are into it, I think that once in a while I go with some friends. But more day to day, it's these activities. What else? I think emotionally, psychologically, I just carry forward what we learned in our teenage adolescence at the ashram. And I think that has, at that time, I think we just heard and did some, some little things that were appropriate at that time. But I think that effort has continued. In some ways I have progressed. In some ways I've actually gone back, which is what life is about. You can't just go forward. But yeah, I think I don't feel guilty anymore. I think I'm kinder to myself now. I think that takes a lot of burden away. Like even things like, when you're younger or this and that, things used to stay with me, and you would feel guilty. I'm like, okay, that decision was made at that time because that was all I knew, or that was my circumstance. And I think that is something that I have learned more in the last maybe 10 years. And it's so much freer, right? Like you can just be free because you're not bound by, अरे मैंने वो किया था, and क्यों किया था, नहीं करना किया था, उस समय वही पता था, that's why I did it. I didn't know better. Maybe आज नहीं करूंगी, but today I know different things, right? It's okay. That was so. I think that is one big change for me because I was constantly, when I was younger, I was constantly either in the past or the future. So, and I think I live more in the present now, and that is also, I think, helps.
Yeah.
It really helps with not worrying about the future or agonizing about the past, right? So, I don't know. I've been told by some of my friends, like you have a joy about you, and even when there have been difficult times, you're still joyful. And you're able to be joy. And I hadn't thought about it. Like that's not how I had seen myself. Because if I see myself in photographs and all, I see, oh, I look so serious. I look like, I look, so I see myself like that. But when people who know me well say that about me, I'm like, it allows you to look at yourself differently. And that's why I've mentioned it so many times, because these things also allow you to be joyful because you're not carrying all those burdens, and everybody has so many burdens, right? And so it allows you to just be and be a little joyful and happy, and that's what we all are looking for, right? At the end of the day, we can't control what's happening around us, but
Thank you so much, Lom. And before I let you go, I've been curious about, what does your name mean, Lom Harshni? Can you elaborate on that?
yes. So my name is Lom Harshni, which is I was named after a character from a book, but she's also a character in mythology. And I tend to think I'm possibly the only Lom Harshni in the world. I've met Lom Harshak, but I've never met a Lom Harshni. So I don't know, they might be, but Facebook hasn't turned up yet. So when my mom was expecting me, so I have two elder brothers, and she wanted a daughter, and she was actually in Chennai. There's this very famous church there. I don't know what it's called, and she was visiting Chennai, and she was in that church. And my mom was one of those people who, like, when we were kids, she used to take us to the Gurdwara, Mandir, everywhere. Like, her philosophy is blessings wherever they come from. Why should I refuse? So we were always taught, like, like Sarvadharam kind of thing, like all religions are equal, that kind of thing. So she was in the church and she was praying for her daughter, and she was also reading this book, which is called Lom Harshni. And it's written by a Gujarati novelist, and he was a lawyer, novelist, freedom fighter, his whole time. And he's written about Lom Harshni, who was in the ashram with Lord Parshuram. So my mom liked her character so much, so she said, if I have a daughter, and I will name her Lom Harshni. And then I came along and she named me Lom Harshni, and I was told it means jo room ko harshit kar de. So that church worked, and my mom got back this, small photograph image of Mother Mary and Jesus. It was a blonde, white kind of very Western looking Jesus, cherubic, this typical. And that actually used to be on a dining room mantelpiece all through my growing up years. I don't know whether they still have that or not, but like until I was in my 20s. And all my childhood, I was told that, Pahari children, like from mountains, we have fairer skin, lighter hair and all that. And when I was all my childhood, I was told, oh, I prayed for you and you used to look like baby Jesus there. So all my childhood, I believed that's what I looked like. And, like I was special because I looked like Jesus, and my mom prayed in the church, and then I went to a Catholic school. So I was with Jesus. So I believed I was a special child because of that. So it's a good feeling to have, irrespective of true or false, but it's good to feel special.
You were a special child in more ways than one for your parents, I'm sure, but also for your family and your friends and all of us that have known you all these years. So it's been a real joy, Lom. Thank you so much once again for gracing the show, and I wish you all the very best and many, many years of peace and joy and more books that you can author. So please continue.
Thank you so much, Anu. And will you kill me if I add one more thing?
I will not. I will not. You're completely allowed.
There's a teacher in me. It just doesn't stop. Okay, so if whoever watches this, I think there's one thing I want to share with Indian parents, especially. I think we can be very harsh on our kids, and one thing I learned, which I've tried to incorporate, I think very hard. Our way of showing love can sometimes be very tough love, right? And but I think for children, especially children of this generation, they see it as abuse. Like, we say, "Acha, thappad marungi," stuff like that, which is, and again, I don't know if, I know like in the north, it's very common. I don't know if it's different in other parts of India, but it's very tough love, right? And I think in China, like, this lady who used to help me, and she became like a surrogate grandmother to my daughter. And I realized she never even used to raise her voice. And my daughter used to listen to everything she said. And you don't need to raise your voice, right? And I obviously wasn't like that. And but it made me see that, yeah, actually there are other ways of parenting. And I go back to my ashram thing. And if you remember, whenever Swami used to talk to us, discourse, he always used to address us as either Prema Swarupalara, right? Embodiments of love, or Atma Swarupalara, right? Embodiments of divine Atma, right? And the last many years, I've been thinking about that. And I think at some level, psychologically, that was such a powerful move, because what that did was, not that we thought we were this great divine being, but at some level, it was constant reinforcement that you are good. You are better than who you think you are. You are wonderful. You are whatever divine. It might need not be divine, but like you are greater than and better than who you think you are. And I think that reinforcement is so important. And I've tried to incorporate some of that. Not when my daughter was younger, actually, but my daughter actually told me. She said, like, I remember once I pushed, like, when she was, it's like on you, and I kind of pushed her, and she looked at me. She was 2.5, and she said, "Why are you pushing me? I love you." And it made me think, yeah, why am I pushing her? Like, she's showing love, right? Like, we can sometimes not be careful with what we're doing, whether it's in words and actions. And I think just telling our kids that they are good, rather than saying, "Oh, you know what? That other one got a medal, or that other one got better marks, or got into medical college," right? Where we're telling you are not good enough, right? And I think, like, for Indian parents, it's really important. But I've tried to do some of that. And I think we all, as collectively, I think it's something that possibly we all can do better at. I'm sorry, it sounds like very preachy,
No,
but
I think that is a very, very important point that you raised, and something I could do another episode with you on. I think that's a very, very important message for all the Indian parents out there. The previous generations, let bygones be bygones, but I think in our generation and the coming generations, that understanding has to be there. So that
sensibilities have changed, right?
not only affects the quality of upbringing those kids, but also, the future relationship between the parents and children, and how they view themselves and how they end up shaping the world around them.
Exactly.
So on that note, Lom, thank you so much. We'll definitely connect once again. I'd love to bring you back, and we might have a conversation around parenting. I think all the parents will benefit from this conversation. And at least gives us an opportunity to re-examine our own ways of parenting, the way we treat ourselves, and it becomes an extension of what we do to the kids. So thank you. Have a wonderful day. And it's been
Thank you, Anu. Same to you. And keep the good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.